Hello, good people of YouTube. Welcome to episode 24 of What Makes This Song Special. Every week, I take a different song. I talk about why it's special to me. We talk a wee bit about a story behind why it's special to me. And then I talk a little bit about the singer of the song and maybe what the song's about sometimes if it's something interesting. And that's it. That's how the episodes work. So over the last few weeks, I've been hearing lots of Elvis Presley songs on the TV, on the radio. I've been playing gigs and people have been coming up and asking me to play The Wonder of You, Jailhouse Rock, Blue Suede Shoes, Hound Dog, Burning Love. Why has Elvis made a resurgence? Not that he ever went away, but I feel more than ever I'm getting asked to play Elvis songs all the time. And people are talking about them on social media. Am I missing something? It turns out, yes, I'm missing something. I've missed that there's a movie, a biopic, the story of his life, and it's in the cinemas, and I seem to be the last person to find this out. I found out the other day, and apparently it's been out for a few weeks now, so I'll definitely need to go and see it. I haven't seen it yet. Definitely keen to go and see it. It's always interesting finding out the story of a popular singer, or somebody who I've always liked. Maybe not one of my absolute favourite idols, but definitely somebody who I've enjoyed listening to over the years. An amazing performer, a great singer. We'll talk about a wee bit about his voice later on. But yeah, so it's the story of his life, and there are songs like the ones I mentioned that I've played a million times at weddings, private functions, piano bars, because they're great, they're upbeat, they get everybody dancing, singing along. And there are some songs of his that I haven't heard for years because I kind of went through a wee phase of listening to Elvis for a while, many years ago. And then maybe not so much as the years went by. And there are songs that I kind of forgot about. And so I had a wee listen the other day after watching, I think on Instagram, somebody shared the trailer for the film. And there were all these songs in the trailer that I hadn't heard in ages. So I went down memory lane. And I listened to some Elvis songs the other day, and I just was in awe of how great all these songs were. And I know he didn't write, I don't know if he wrote any actually, but he definitely didn't write many if he did. But they're great songs, and the way he performed them was great. And they just sort of take you to an era long before I was born, but it takes you to that era. It's fantastic. So the trailer, there was a song in the trailer that really took me back to a story. And the story was, or the song was, An American Trilogy. What a song. I mean, just amazing. I hadn't heard that song in so long. And it actually was at one point a real favourite of mine, but for some reason, over the years, kind of forgot about it. And it awoke all these memories and emotions in me. And I thought, I need to do an episode on the song. So this episode wasn't really planned for this week. Not that I've got a real plan anyway, but I've got a few written down for the upcoming weeks, and this wasn't in there until obviously I watched that trailer, and I thought I need to talk about the song. So I'm going to go back to about 2001 ish, and I don't remember why, but I'd bought an Elvis Greatest Hits album. Again, at that point I wasn't really a big Elvis fan, knew a few songs, and I think I'd seen the Greatest Hits album for like a fiver or something. It was like a CD album. And I thought, that's a great price. I'll buy the Greatest Hits. It had lots of songs on it. And every weekend, as soon as I get paid, I've mentioned this before, I'd always head into the city centre in Glasgow, straight to a shop called Fop that sold albums for a fiver when everybody else was selling them for £15. And it was great. You could buy a few albums every week with your wages and then go back and listen to all these different songs and be inspired by it and stuff, So often it was bands or artists I didn't even really know about, but this obviously was the Elvis Greatest Hits. So a lot of the songs, when I listened to it, I recognised them immediately. I mean, there are so many famous Elvis songs, and others were new to me, and I was really enjoying them. Great melodies, fantastic arrangements, and fronted by that distinctive Elvis tone that everybody knows. At that time, I was working part-time as a sort of chef / dishwasher in a country club in the south side of Glasgow, which I've mentioned before. And it was providing me with money to buy CDs and socialise with friends while I tried to make it as a rock star on the side. So the kitchen was this real journey into adulthood for me. You know, like most people, you leave school, you're still just a kid, even if you're 18, 17, 18, you're just this kid that's got little kind of life experience as an adult or with adults other than your parents and family members. And you've really only known hanging about with other kids. And teachers at school treat you like a kid. And then you get your first job, and all of a sudden you go from, you know, being a kid and hanging out with kids to hanging out with people from a full spectrum of adult ages, you know, and all of a sudden you're aware of this world outside your own that you weren't aware of before. People who had completely different life experiences to yours, people who had completely different, grew up in different places with different experiences, and it makes you kind of question everything you had opinions on. All of a sudden you're talking about politics and you're talking about, you know, just philosophy and all these things you maybe hadn't thought too much about when you were a kid and just wanted to run around playing with your friends. And the guys that I worked with in the kitchen, you know, some of them were kind of real tough men. You know, they were men. They weren't boys. They were real kind of tough guys. They'd been there, done it, and they were all of them were at least kind of 10 years older than me, and they had life experience. They'd worked long hours in a hot, stressful environment with no windows and no fresh air. You know, kitchens can be a tough place to work. And when they get the chance to party, they were wild. They were absolutely wild. So all the kind of wild parties that I'd had as a teenager, you know, they were nothing compared to these guys. And I'd been in a couple of nights out with these guys by this point, and it was beyond anything that I could ever have imagined. Me and a couple of lads that I'd gone to school with, who also worked there, a few of us went and worked there after school, and we spent most of our time laughing about the utter madness that had gone on in these nights out. There were copious amounts of alcohol, you know, fights, casinos, police, ambulances, a couple of occasions, which is actually, it had all been promised to us by the chefs. So I think when they saw us when we started, they were like, well, you need to come on a night out with real men, and there'll be, you know, ambulances, and there'll be this and there'll be that. And we were like, yeah, whatever. And then we went out, and it was exactly as they'd promised. It was insane. And we just weren't ready for that at all. I remember the sous chef, Tony McKenna, a good pal, saying to us before our first ever staff night out that we just didn't have a clue what a night out was until we'd been out with them. And yeah, that was all very true. So they were crazy, and yet they were all really great guys. They were great guys that I'd gone from being quite apprehensive and sort of almost scared around them at first to becoming really close friends with them all and learning to love those guys. And again, the age gap doesn't matter at that point, because all of a sudden you're working in this adult world where you can be chatting away to somebody who's 60 when you're 19, and it's not like when you're at school and you're speaking to an adult. All of a sudden you're on the same playing field with them in a weird way. So we just had an amazing time working there. The camaraderie, the banter was second to none in that kitchen. And I just about managed to stay on the sort of periphery of all the trouble when we did go out. Huge learning curve. Anyway, so the song, I'm digressing, but the song reminds me of one Saturday morning around that time. I took my new Elvis CD into the kitchen. As always, we would have this, there was a wee kind of hi-fi above the kind of pot wash, and we would stick on different CDs, and sometimes if I'd written songs and put them on CD, I would put them on in there and let people in the kitchen hear my new songs. But any new album I get put on, and the Elvis CD was playing that day. So it's Elvis songs blaring out for a while, and everybody was preparing for the busy lunch service that was always busy lunch on a Saturday. We're slagging each other off, winding up the waiting staff, flirting with girls that come in for something to eat from their break. And then an American Trilogy came on, and Jimmy, the head chef, he just shouted, "Stop! Everybody stop what you're doing! Stop! We're going to listen to this song." And he shouted over to me to turn it up, and I wasn't really sure what was going on, because everybody just stopped, did what the boss said, and we all just stood there listening to the song. And as I looked around the kitchen, there were tears in Jimmy's eyes, there were tears in old George's eyes, George Dick, the legend, a big smile on Tony's face. It was just like this moment where everything just stopped, and everybody was quite kind of emotional. This I was like, why is this song important to these guys? I had no idea. And the bit where the big stabs from the orchestra happen, dum dum dum, which you'll hear if you listen to the song. It's a really kind of emotive part. Jimmy moved his arms in time with the music, like he was conducting the orchestra. And we all just stood in silence and listened to the song. It was this amazing moment, and it made me realise that there was like a real softness to these tough guys, and that music could always bring out the best emotions in people. The song obviously awoke an emotion of some sort in our boss Jimmy. Took him to a time in his life or another story, a different story to mine. But when I hear that song now, I always think of those guys, the lessons I learned from them, the amazing and hilarious times we had working in that kitchen for a couple of years after I left school, while I was trying to make it as a rock star. And it just, yeah, that's what it always reminds me of, just that day where we just all stopped and listened to that song. And I saw right through everything. It was just a moment in time that stopped, and I sort of realised that everybody had this emotion in them from songs. Everybody has these. So I mean, I'm doing these episodes every week. What do these songs mean to me? These songs will mean something to everybody, and that's why I always want people to comment. What does this song mean to you? Why is it special to you if it is special? So anyway, that's the wee story. A silly wee story, but a wee story that reminds me of that song, or that I'm reminded of when I hear that song. With regards to the music behind the song, I don't think, obviously Elvis doesn't need much of an introduction, so I'm going to focus on the song and then a bit about his vocal style rather than talking about Elvis, who I think everybody knows. So the song was written by Mickey Newbury, who was a singer-songwriter who had his own solo career, but he also wrote songs for artists like Andy Williams, Tom Jones, Kenny Rogers, so a really successful career. Probably more successful as a songwriter than an actual performer himself, but wrote some great songs, and he actually medleyed 3 old 19th century songs to make an American trilogy. I suppose that's why it's called an American trilogy. So these 19th century American songs, one was called Dixie, which was a popular folk song about the southern United States. The other song was the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was a marching hymn of the Union Army during the American Civil War. And then All My Trials, which is the end part, is a lullaby related to African American spirituals and widely used also in folk music. So he kind of like medleyed these 3 songs together, and he released the song in 1971, and then in 1972 for some reason Elvis started covering it at live shows, and then finally released his own version on some live albums. And Elvis's version never made it as high in the charts as the original, even though it's the one that most people would associate. But it actually became, much more famous than the original version of the song over the years. Elvis's voice, his vocal style is one of the most distinctive voices you'll ever hear. You can hear that it's somebody, or you can hear that either somebody's doing an Elvis impression or it's Elvis when you hear that sound. A deep, warm bass tone that sounds like has his larynx dampened really quite heavily. Yet he was able to get really high in his chest voice at times as well. I may be wrong, but I don't really think I ever heard Elvis sing in his head voice or falsetto voice. I might be wrong. I should probably have done my homework on that, but I can't think of any kind of famous examples where he sang in head voice or falsetto. Most of it's in full chest voice. And actually until the 1950s, it was actually quite unusual to hear male singers using head voice at all. A lot of female singers sang only in head voice and never used their chest voice, and vice versa. And it was actually partially due to style, but also because some very outdated ideas that it was dangerous for men to sing in head voice and for women to sing in chest voice, which, as we know now, is complete nonsense. But that was kind of a belief at one point in history. I think aside from that instantly recognisable tone of Elvis's, the thing that also stands out is the impressive power in his voice. He's got this really powerful voice, really emotive voice, and he had the ability to really show off the dynamics of his voice when singing ballads. And yet he had a really cool rock and roll sound as well for songs like Heartbreak Hotel and Jailhouse Rock and that type of, those kind of 12-bar blues tracks that he did. his voice sounded really cool, rock and roll, very different to the kind of really soft, emotive crooner type voice that he had when he did some of the slower ballads. And when he did sing high and chest voice, his voice still sounded really big and full. It didn't thin out or become too nasal, and I think that's also partially because of what I mentioned before about that kind of dampened laryngeal style that he had as well. So I think certainly for the higher sustain notes on those ballads anyway, I think the larynx was definitely dampened. So there's just a wee bit, I won't bore you anymore with vocal technique. I know that that's only interesting to singers. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please click for part 2. That'll come up here in a second to hear me singing my version of An American Trilogy. Kind of difficult one to do without the big orchestra and stuff, so it'll be my own take as always, just on the piano. I hope today's video's been enjoyable. I had to use my usual camera as a way of getting fixed, so I had to use my iPhone today, so it might be slightly different to usual. I feel like I've been trying to find where my eyes are or where the camera lens is, so it might look as if I'm looking all over the place, but a bit different to usual. But I hope you enjoyed it. That's what the song reminds me of. That's why it's special to me, the song. Why is it special to you? Leave a wee comment in the comment section, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much.